Transformative Principal, episode 98 with Doug Timm. Doug Timm is a principal out in Delaware at Carrie, Downie Elementary School, and he and I have been chatting with each other on Voxer for a while, and I'm really excited for you to chat with him today. He is going to talk about how he does instructional rounds with his coaches at his school and how powerful that is. He's focusing on Bloom's taxonomy, and it's really good. There's a picture of the results from his walkthroughs in the show notes, so please make sure you check that out. And if you would like to get a copy of the form that he's using, just subscribe to the newsletter, and I will put it in there, and you'll be able to access it. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you enjoy this interview with Doug Timm. All right, welcome to Transformative Principal. Today I am honored to have Doug Timm on the podcast. I've been a friend and follower of Doug Timm for a while, and he always has amazing things to say, and I are in a Voxer group together, and I've just learned a ton from him, so I'm excited to finally have him on the show today. Timm is a principal in Delaware, and it is a different experience than what I'm doing out in Alaska, but there are a lot of great things that he's doing that I wanted to make sure people knew about. So, Timm, do you want to start by talking about what your observations are like and how you are doing some neat things with those?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you a little bit of background information.
That'll work too.
Yeah, I've been an administrator for eight or 9 years, and I worked in a middle school for 7 years. I've been in my current position at Carrie Downie Elementary School in the Colonial School District for a little over a year and a half. And in doing that, this is my first principalship where I had really, ultimate sort of say in what was going on. And I knew I wanted to kind of create an atmosphere within the school of community, innovation, and pushing technology within a framework of looking at standards and using those as the beginning of how we are going to push our students. That was how the work started. And then we were fortunate enough to work with a group teacher, and they introduced us to instructional rounds. And not only instructional rounds, but they call them cognitive growth targets, which is really just a packaged way of talking about Bloom's taxonomy. When we looked at it through that lens and added a layer to what I was already thinking, that not only do I want students to create really cool things and show mastery of standards in that way, but I really want them to be pushed to think beyond just comprehension and recalling information. I really want them to analyze and reason things and metacognate about stuff and all that Bloom's wording put in there. And that's what pushed the thinking to where we are now, and why I track it in a way to share with staff so that they understand that we need to push thinking as much as we are pushing content. So that's a little bit of a background. Really, it started at the beginning of last year with a few trainings, face-to-face stuff, where we just kind of sat down and we looked at tasks that students were doing. So now when doing observations, I don't really look at the teacher per se. I look at what they're doing and what they're assigning, and then I look at what the students are doing and assigning. Our first meeting on this was there was 5 or 6 of us, and we spread out into 2 different classrooms and basically wrote down every single thing that we saw or heard a kid or the teacher say or do over about a 25-minute period. It was super reflective in that when we came back, we had mounds of information that we needed to sort through. So we basically just started listing every single task that we saw a child do or the teacher do. And this became quite a big list. I mean, this was maybe a 45-minute reflection session. And the teacher was just the group that had done the instructional rounds. At that point, we looked at each of the tasks and applied our Bloom's taxonomy to that. So we looked and said, is this recalling information? Is this analyzing information? Did that question ask kids to reason or whatever? And what we found very quickly was that the majority of the things that the students were doing were just either retrieving information or comprehending information. Even if, in one particular case, a teacher had students at 6 different centers, and you would think wonderful differentiation as far as the activity, but the tasks themselves only made them think through comprehension. And that was eye-opening to all of us. We kind of realized, because when we left there, we were thinking, wow, that was an awesome lesson. That was great stuff. I mean, they were engaged and the kids were doing stuff, but they were doing 6 different things that were all asking of them sort of the same skill and thinking of comprehending. And how can we differentiate not only activities, but differentiate the way that kids think? And that's where we pushed ourselves. We came up with ideas, as many as we could, in that room, in that 45 minutes of what could we have done differently? How could we have tweaked this question or this task just a little bit, giving the teacher some of that information back, and then, let them run with it. So it has transformed my way of thinking about when I talk to teachers about their lesson plans and what they have coming up. And it has enabled us to have a really good dialogue in common language where it's not threatening. So, for example, the best example I can think of this year recently was a third grade team. We were about a book they were reading, and they had a question that they wanted to ask about Charlotte's Web was the book. I'm sorry, I was having a moment there. And they were talking about how Charlotte would feel on the farm and creating webs and collecting insects and what Charlotte's life is like on the farm. And they wanted the kids to kind of do a personal narrative of Charlotte's life on the farm. Well, that's great. That's just comprehending what they read in the story. So to push the kids' thinking, so let's give the kids some context knowledge of what it is to live in a city. And how would Charlotte's life have been different if Charlotte lived in a skyscraper in New York City? So you're really kind of thinking, you have to put yourself, you have to know, obviously understand what you know about Charlotte, but then apply some other thinking involved in that and kind of put yourselves in the shoes of Charlotte in the city. And that's not a major shift, but enough of a shift that really gets kids to think. And that's kind of the way in which I try to approach and giving people feedback at this point. How do kids think perspective, if that makes sense? I know that was probably a long, rambling answer, but.
No, it was really great, and I appreciate that. And to sum up, basically, the approach that you're taking with your instructional rounds and your walkthroughs is moving people down the depth of knowledge chart or up the Bloom's taxonomy chart, whichever way you want to talk about it, so that we're doing more analyzing, reasoning, creating self-actualization kind of stuff with them. And your observations are specifically focused on that. Now, is that all that you're looking for, or are you doing everything else too? But this is just a way for you to see what's going on.
Yeah. No, I mean, you still, obviously, when you are in a classroom, if there's problems with management or relationships between a teacher and a student, and you notice that those need to be improved, I mean, those are things you obviously, need to address as well. But I would say my focus when I'm in there is on tasks, and tasks specifically. I mean, unless the management is to the point where it's affecting the classroom itself, and that way I go a different route. That's more of an evaluative route. But some of the other things are in place. This is what is pushing my thinking with the teachers is, what tasks are they doing? Like, what exactly do you want the students to do? And sometimes having that conversation, teachers realize, what I actually want them to do is not what I'm asking them to do. So I need to change what I'm asking them to do to really get where I want them to be. And just thinking through that process. And I think that that's a reflective process, but it also is one to help push the teacher's thinking. So, and we have a tool. I mean, it's a really simple form that we fill out, myself and the coaches. We've used it second half of last year and this year. And it's just teacher name, the task that we noticed, the overall task of the room. If there's 6 different things going on, we kind of pick the main task and then identify where it falls in that scale. And we've tracked it. We probably have about 120 something data points. And what I want to see and what I share with staff from time to time is, where are we? Are we still in that retrieving, comprehending, and how do we move to analyzing and reasoning more? You have to do comprehension. You have to do retrieval of information at times. It's inevitable. We're not going to live in a reasoning world. Get there. And we need to get there as much as we possibly can. That's kind of the idea for all of that.
Cool. So why is it so important to move up Bloom's taxonomy? And not just like, we all know what it is and we know that it's important to do that, but why are you taking such a strong stance on it now when you maybe haven't before?
It's a good question. I don't know that I didn't before. I just don't know if I truly understood what it looked like or what it could look like. I don't know, through the work last year, and we did these large group sessions of instructional rounds 4 total times. And then I did them on a smaller scale with just my coaches an additional 3 or 4 times. And I think through those conversations, I really began to realize the importance of how kids think and why do we need to make sure that our kids are thinking and being creative beyond just recalling information. And then I go back to, what they always say about the U.S. educational system versus the world. Well, be lacking in that. We are still the creators of content for the world. I mean, when new products come out, they generally come out of the U.S. because we are creators. We are people that think beyond, just replicating something that may already be done. We want to come up with new, innovative ways of doing that. And if you can't train your brain to analyze and reason and all of those, it goes way beyond analyzing and reasoning. But if you can't train your brain to do that and you can't practice that, then innovation stops, and all you're doing is just regurgitating stuff that's already been done before. So it's really a much bigger picture for preparing kids to be problem solvers, but you have to practice those skills. And I've seen where, students, if they can't necessarily find the answer right away, they get frustrated. And that's that little bit of a fixed mindset as well. Where's the answer? Well, the answer might not be there. That's that making inferences. What do you think the answer could be? And then how would you defend that? And why is it important to defend your answer? I guess it just clicked for me through multiple conversations and seeing this in practice. And the other part to it that I didn't mention earlier was when in a observation anymore, I don't make inference. There are no good observations or bad observations. There is just what you see and what actually happens. And I think when you go in not thinking that was great, or I should say when you leave not thinking that was great, it trains you also to really take it for what it is. I know as a teacher, I would oftentimes grade papers of students and say, oh, I know what he meant there. That's exactly what he meant. And I'm going to give him, an A plus, but really it was probably C plus work. But I kind of know the kid and, I make an inference and he just had a bad day and I'm going to give him an A. But that's not really what happens. And that's not really what happened, or that's not really what he wrote. So it's not about whether or not I like you. It's not about whether or not I think that the lesson is good. It's about what actually happened and really documenting that and then using that to try to improve. And my feedback has been, I think has been much more powerful just because it's a conversation. It oftentimes starts with a question, or it starts with a praise, but then it goes from there to questions.
Well, and I really like that idea of not making inferences and observations, because that's a really easy thing to do. And teachers also make those inferences and think, oh, well, he's asking me a question, so it must have been awful, or he is doing whatever, so it must have been awful. And they're making those inferences also. And I think that's a really, really powerful statement, because you don't want it to be about that. You want it to be about what actually was there, what it looked like, what it sounded like, and what you saw, not what you think you saw or what you think they were trying to do. I mean, if they were trying to do some sort of creating and all they were doing was retrieving, there's a big difference there in those two levels. And it's important to not make those inferences. So that's an awesome point you made.
Yeah, I would also say the one thing I've done since this, and maybe I did a little bit before, but it's actually talking to the kids during an observation. How often does the observer just sit in the back of the room and write down stuff or type away? I sit at a desk with the kids and I listen to them talk when they're doing group work, and I ask them questions. What are you supposed to be doing right now? What were you thinking when you wrote that answer? Or, that was a good point. Why did you go there with that? Because I think you can add that into the conversation. It might not necessarily be a part of the written document that you submit to a teacher as an observation, but it certainly can be a part of the conversation you have with the teacher afterwards and say, this group over here was talking about this, and why do you think they went there? Where was there either a misconception, or where did they even extend that thinking? And they could have been pushed a little further. So, I kind of embed myself, if that makes sense, into the classroom as much as possible, which in elementary school is kind of hard when you're 6 foot tall, but I did the best I can.
So it's funny you bring that up, because I got a piece of feedback from one of my teachers last year that said that she really didn't like it when I came into the classroom and sat away from the kids. And what she wanted me to do was come in and sit right next to a student and get in their business and see what they were doing, so that I could know more about the lesson. And what was interesting was that was what I typically did last year. And 3 or 4 times in a row, there wasn't seats available next to kids because she had full classrooms and good attendance. And so there weren't any places for me to sit. And I remember thinking that it was fascinating that she recognized that and wanted me to do that so that I could have a better idea of what was actually going on. And that's a really, really good way to connect with the kids and connect with the teachers as they're doing their lesson.
Yeah. It also takes it away from, I always used to hate the, "Good morning, Mr. Timm," from the whole class when I entered the room. It's like, I don't need that. Like, let's just continue on. Like, that's a disruption. Like, you don't need to say good morning to me as a whole class. It's fine. I don't want to be a stranger.
No, a couple of kids can smile.
Smile, wave, a couple high fives.
Yeah, totally. When you do these observations, are they tied to your evaluation system, or are you doing these separately from that evaluation system?
It's a great question. There's really like a two-pronged approach. We have a state evaluation system, which we actually just modified and have not been trained on the new system yet. It's the same idea of observation, but it's a new way of form, I guess is the best way of saying it. So it's going to look a little different this year. And I actually haven't started any official observations. But the other part to it is this coaching model that's a weekly, and you do have people that I've assigned myself to people, and my two coaches are assigned to people as well. And it's a weekly observation and then a follow-up feedback meeting. And it's somewhat formalized. It's nothing that's necessarily recorded anywhere or put in anyone's file, but it's formalized in that it does occur on a weekly basis. And the teachers know when we're coming and then give feedback. And I guess a third pronged approach to that is I don't know, I call them like walkabouts. I can't sit in my office for more than 15, 20 minutes at any given time. I just get antsy. And I think that's just a personal issue of mine. But I get up and I just walk around. And when I'm in classrooms, I do use my phone or iPod, and I do record when I'm in there. If I'm in there a good 5 or 10 minutes and I can identify the task, I do record at that point where they're falling in the cognitive growth target. Like I said, this form, we started out with this thing being like 8 different sections and realized, you know what? We don't need that. We need teacher name, task, cognitive growth target, or Bloom taxonomy. Where does it fall? That's it. That's all we needed. That's the only thing we're trying to track right now. So it comes in multiple forms. So to answer your question, there is the official observation system. That does occur. And then there are these official walkthroughs. But after that, it's really just me, the coaches, getting up, walking around, being a part of the school, seeing what's happening. I take a lot of videos and pictures, a lot of stuff. So if I'm not in classrooms, I can't do that either. So, that's kind of the idea. Back to your other point about the teachers saying, I want you to sit with the kids. The other thing that has been transformed or changed from what it used to be was I used to get asked a lot, well, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And I'm like, I don't necessarily, I want you to teach the kids the best you can. That's what I want you to do. It's not about what I want. It's really about what is the need that you have right now in your classroom. And it's a little bit of a shift, but I want them to be real and authentic and be okay that when we have feedback or when I give you feedback, it's not saying that you're doing something wrong or bad. It's saying, how can we do it a little bit better? And there's definitely a back and forth. And every time that I've had a feedback session with somebody, and I've been wrong, quite frankly, and I admit it. And, a teacher has called me out and said, no, that's not what happened. And, why don't you come again and see, and I'll show you, because maybe I misunderstood something. So I think it's all, Jethro, we talk about this all the time, but it back to relationships as well. That has to be put in place before you can, I think really give good feedback.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. So at my last school, it took me 3 years to get to this point, but towards the end of the third year, I had a couple teachers that would say, hey, I'm going to try something new and I want you to come in and see it. I don't care if you use it for my formal evaluation or not, but I'm going to do something new and I want you to see what it's like because I want your feedback about how it worked out. And for them to get to that point where they know that I care about them doing their best and they want to try something new that they know isn't going to be good, but want to find the holes in it. That was amazing. And those teachers who got to that point were really taking it up to the next level and were being incredibly professional and doing fantastic things that they weren't trying to please me. They were trying to reach their students. And when that conversation changed to, I'm going to reach my students and you need to come in so that I have somebody else watching who can say, yes, you're doing that. It was incredible. And so it made our relationship better. It made their teaching better. It made everything so much better. It was amazing.
Yeah. And it really, I think it kind of also just solidifies the fact that they have a growth mindset. I kind of had the same experience and probably more last year. Absolutely. Especially when a teacher says, I'm going to try something for the first time today. Can you come in?
Yeah, totally.
The first time that I'm, let's just have delivering some sort of PD that I never was really uncomfortable with, would really want my boss to be there, because if it messes up, who knows? But, and my boss is super, 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 super supportive. But you're right. That's a great feeling to have, to be invited in the classroom. There's nothing better than that. You just hope that no emergencies arise, that you have to go put any fires out on the way down the hallway. But assuming that all goes well, invited in the classroom by a teacher, it's something that they want that feedback. And I think sometimes they do want to hear a good job. So I know I maybe sound sort of harsh or cold in that I don't say good job or bad job, but I do give them praise. And that might sound something like, it was impressive how it only took your students 10 seconds to go from one activity to the next. Your transitions are really, really tight, and that really benefits student learning. So the praise is definitely something that you need to continue, but it's cool that you brought that up, because that is something special.
Yeah, it definitely is. I know that we need to get wrapped up as far as time goes. I want to ask you the final question, which is, what is one thing that someone can start doing today to be a transformative principal like you?
Probably the one thing that someone can do today to become a transformative principal, assuming that you have a good relationship with your building and your staff, I think what you really need to do is just kind of run your building and see and figure out exactly what focus that you want to have, whether it be technology, literacy, math, whatever it might be, student ownership over something, but really just walk around and take the pulse of your building and say, where are we and where do we need to go from here? And then get your team together and figure out how to get there. And I think that, too many of us have too many focuses and too many ways that we want to schools, and we might hear something from somebody or see something on Twitter and say, oh, we're going to do that. And then a week later, oh, we're going to do this, or, oh, we're going to try that. Try to keep that focus as much concentrated on whatever it is where you think your building is, and go with it and be consistent and understand that the process to get to where you want to be is the learning. There is no real end game in education. There's no finish line. So how do we keep the focus on something where there is no finish line, and then continue to progress towards it? And I think that it's more of an idea than something you can actually do. But I do think walking around the building and being in every classroom as much as possible and getting that idea of where you are or where there are some holes that need to be improved on, and then getting your team together to work on it is probably the thing that is most transformative. It's been the most transformative for me. I think that I have a pretty good idea of where the temperature of my building is and where I can push and when I should push and when I need to kind of pull back a little bit, because I don't think you can move a building if you don't know that. And people will say the right fit times, but if you're not out there observing it and talking with people, then you really don't know. So as much as you can, get embedded, right?
That's right, man. That's powerful. There is no end game in education. So true. Doug, how can people connect with you and learn more from you?
I guess on Twitter, I'm at DougTimm34. I do blog regularly, and then there's a link on my Twitter page. I'm on Google Plus as well. We do weekly videos from our school. So if you look up Douglas Timm on YouTube, there's a picture of me, and I use that as the school connection to our weekly video. So every week, staff take pictures. We average between 150 and 300 pictures a week. I capture them, put them in a video with videos, and then that becomes a slideshow, put some popular music to it. It's usually about 15 to 20 minutes long, and you can see what we're doing. And I try to interview kids a little bit as much as I can and have fun with it. And it's not always an academic focus, but that's okay, because the videos are really for the community. It's not necessarily for any other reason. And they don't want to see a bunch of boring stuff all the time, so we try to spice it up a little bit. But I have a wonderful staff that is super supportive. We are not a very large building, 385 students, but I think we have a pretty powerful message. So the Twitter feed, our hashtag #CDDolphins, me on Twitter, and then our YouTube weekly videos, as well as some other short things I put up there, are probably the way that we get our message out the most.
Yeah, you're doing a lot of awesome stuff, and we could probably talk for hours. And in fact, I think we have talked for hours on Voxer about all the cool things you're doing. So thank you so much, and I appreciate your time doing this today.
Yeah, Jethro, I mean, great job. I really appreciate you just reaching out to me. I'm very, very humbled to be a part of this. I do appreciate it, and I do definitely look forward to talking to you maybe even later today or tomorrow or Monday. So anyway, thanks a lot, Jethro. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, sir.
Really great interview with Doug Timm. He is an awesome principal, and please make sure you check out his YouTube channel like he suggested. He's got some amazing things on there, and he walks around with a little microphone and interviews kids, and it is so cool. We didn't have time to get into that today, but maybe we can have him back on another time and get some more of that. Just want to say thank you for listening to this episode. I know that I have learned so much from doing this, and I hope that is helping you become a better leader yourself. Last week I mentioned the Picker app that we developed at my school, and it's been working out amazingly for us on my website, jethrojones.com. If you click on the presentations tab, you can see more information about the presentations we did at the principals conference earlier this year that worked out really well. Really glad that we had that opportunity. Thanks so much for listening to Transformative Principal. I am Jethro Jones. Have a great day. Transformative Principal is a proud member of the Edu Podcast Network. If you want to learn something new, check out Jennifer Gonzalez's Cult of Pedagogy podcast. She's got a great website with beautiful design and produces really great content all the time.